Welcome to the Event Pro Show, your ultimate guide to the world of corporate events. Whether you're a corporate event planner, experiential marketing pro, producer, technician, or anyone involved in creating exceptional events, this podcast is your go-to resource for valuable insights, expert tips, and inspiring stories from the industry's leading professionals.
Well, thank you for joining us on the Event Pro Show. We have a great show today, and I want to get into it. But before that, I have Wendy Porter with me. Wendy, what is the temperature in Minneapolis right now?
We are at 1 degree at the moment. Mine feels like minus 13.
Oh my goodness.
Fabulous.
Okay, I'm in the Carolinas. It's in the 40s and 50s. People are freaking out. There's big jackets. Everybody's pulled out. You know, people aren't
running
sure.
around in shorts and sandals in that temperature.
Right. Yeah. So we do not live in similar places for sure. But let me do your intro, Wendy. Today we're joined by Wendy Porter. She's the founder and chief event strategist at Wendy Porter Events. And like we mentioned, a Minneapolis-based agency known for crafting high-impact corporate events that foster brand engagement and deliver measurable ROI. With over 23 years of experience in the event industry, Wendy spent 13 years as the head of events at a Fortune 25 company. I bet you needed a nap after that.
Yep.
Leading large-scale conferences, strategic sponsorships, and recognized for her leadership. She was named one of the 100 most influential people in the U.S. events industry in 24. Congratulations. And also congratulations for receiving the Smart Woman in Meetings Visionary Award. And Wendy is also a passionate advocate for the industry, having played a pivotal role in lobbying for the live events sector during the pandemic. And thank you for that. And her insights have been featured in major outlets like the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and local media. Wendy's strategic vision and advocacy continue to shape the future of corporate events. And we're excited to dive into her expertise today. So please welcome to the show, Wendy Porter.
Thank you so much, Seth. It's wonderful to be here.
Yes. And truth be told, we met on LinkedIn, as all good business relationships begin. And we just started talking, and you have like a really compelling story about what you do. And I needed to hear more about it. So thank you for being a guinea pig on the Event Pro Show.
I love this kind of stuff.
Let me ask you an opening question. So what's the first event that you can remember attending?
So this is kind of an interesting one. I had to think back. We lived in Hawaii when I was a kid. So let's talk about a fundamental shift from Minnesota to Hawaii.
Wow.
My dad was stationed there as an Army guy. And one of the things they have in Hawaii is something called King Kamehameha Day. You ever heard of that?
No, I have not.
So it's celebrating basically the king who, founded Hawaii.
Okay.
And so parades and, all the floats and the flowers and just, really festive kind of experience. And we lived in Hawaii when I was about 1 till I was 5. Okay. So some of my earliest memories are of Hawaii. And I remember going to the King Kamehameha Day parade in Hawaii.
Made a big impression on you.
Yeah, totally.
Those are some of my favorite memories are when I'm about that age, because they're just more impressions. And so you remember colors and smells and sounds and things that were inspiring, but you're a kid and you just didn't really understand it, but you knew you loved it, So that's kind of like how I remember a lot of things back in that time frame. But fast forward then, so professionally, what was the first time that you went to an event and you're like, oh, I think I want to do this as a job.
That's not really how my career progression happened. Like a lot of people at my age, honestly, there wasn't an event curriculum when I was in college, right? So I went to school actually for mathematics and German, believe it or not. And my plan was to go into international business. That was my thinking. Yeah. Okay. So I started my career doing marketing, which was great, and ended up doing some international marketing work, I loved it. And I planned some events as part of that, but it was more sort of client events and people coming into the office and planning, full day kind of events for them. Yep. And I didn't really think of that as an event. I thought of it as a meeting, right? And it wasn't until I got to United Healthcare, where I came in as an acquisition marketing manager, and my very first year there, our VP of events VP of marketing came over and handed me a folder and said, "Hey, we're going to sponsor this event. You're going to do it." I was like, okay, never done that before in my life, but I'll figure it out. Right. So that's how I fell into it. And so as I got into it, it turns out I was actually really good at it. And I I always liked sort of planning gatherings, and I did a lot of that, in my neighborhood. I planned our first progressive, Christmas party for the neighborhood, which is still going on 31 years later.
Right.
Um, I used to, when I was a kid, I did the lemonade stand, and I did all that kind of stuff. So, and I gathered my friends for plays and, all that kind of stuff. So I was sort of a natural gatherer as it
Yeah.
was. And so it turns out I was really good at it professionally. And so that's really how I fell into it. So.
It's interesting you mentioned that because it's so entrepreneurial. There's so many people that are in events that are entrepreneurial, and everything that you were just saying was very much like that. Lemonade stand, you're a gatherer. Meaning how I take that is that you figure stuff out. Like you have a skill, a knack for figuring stuff out. And then the other similarity that I heard you say just now is I think so many people were handed a notebook of like, okay, you're doing this event.
Exactly.
And either you love it or you don't.
Right.
I mean, it's like people shake out pretty quick.
Right.
But there's people that stick and they're like, I think I really like this.
Yes.
I like the environment.
Yep.
That's like that adrenaline, do or die kind of,
Yep.
it's harder than people think to do.
Yep.
And not everybody can do it.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, the plan when I first got it was that I was going to have that program for 2 years, right? And I would have an assistant, and the assistant would be helping me and learning the ropes. And then after 2 years, I would hand it off to the next person, and that person would do it with an assistant. So it was never going to be anybody's real job, right?
Right.
Because again, leadership didn't really understand A, the value of events, and B, how much it takes to do them, and that you actually need people who know what they're doing, right? So we tried that 2-year stint because I still had a real, the rest of my job. So we tried that for 2 years. I went to roll it off to my assistant, and it started to go sideways really quick. And so they pulled it back and said, no, we're gonna give this to you now, and we're actually gonna create a position around this now.
Right.
So we're gonna let that other part of your job go. You're gonna now have a position. They actually made it as a director of marketing for events. And then they said, oh, and we've got these other things we need you to do now. So you're going to take on our sales meetings, and you're going to take on our CEO leadership conferences. And, as my team developed, all of a sudden we were doing 350 town hall meetings a year. I worked in the Medicare division of United Healthcare. So we were B2C, right?
Yep.
So we were out meeting with customers and explaining their benefits from year to year. So we had 350 of those we had to do in 8 weeks every fall.
Just on top of the pile of the other events you had to
and then
do.
we stood up our CSR programming and just.
And
so
oh,
it
by
just
the
kept
way,
growing
none of
and
them
growing.
can mess up. Don't mess up on
Yeah,
any
right.
of them.
No, by the way, don't mess up. Yeah.
Why do you think there tends to be, this story of a disconnect between the C-suite or top leadership
Yep.
and what events actually do, how hard they are, what impact they have?
Yep.
I know you have thoughts on total spend, that marketing spend and the ROI on it.
Yep.
But even more than that, why do you think there is been historically this big disconnect between leadership and what events, how hard they are to do?
Yeah, I think honestly, we sort of created our own problem. It's a little bit by design because we want it to look effortless, right? That's why we're all dressed in black. We're behind the scenes. We're supposed to be invisible. You're not supposed to know there's 30 people behind the curtain scurrying around doing production, right? It's supposed to look effortless and magical, and people just show up and it's just done. And so because of that, in a way, we created our own problem because they don't know what goes into it. So I've always said, I've written some posts about this, that every leader should have to be at the table in the trenches with the team on at least one event. Like, get in the trenches behind the scenes and see what really goes into it. Otherwise, you're never really going to get it.
I love that. I run an AV company, and I firmly believe that everyone in the company should go to at least one event a year. And it's the same concept that you're speaking of, is like you can get detached from the reality of what it takes to do an event if everything is just a spreadsheet, and it's not a reality.
Right. And the first trade show that I did, my parents actually came to it because it was an AARP, big AARP thing, and so it was a business to consumer show. And so it was in Chicago. And so I had my mom and dad come, and I said to my mom, I said, just imagine when I showed up, this was a concrete floor. There was nothing here.
Yeah.
You're literally building a house, if you will,
yes,
in 3 days or whatever. We had, our booth was at its height was 13,000 square feet. So if you can wrap your head around how big that is with an 80-foot semi-trailer in it that looked tiny, and, But when you show up, there's nothing there. It's a concrete floor, and you're literally building the house.
Yep. You talked about being behind the scenes. I see this as well too. So again, we work the same events from maybe different sides of the room sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal for everybody is to have this experience, this totally seamless, and an attendee comes in and they just, what you just said, like they wouldn't know that, this was like nothing here. Like there wasn't even carpet here, guys. Like there was nothing here. And we did so good of a job that, tell me if you think this is accurate. Over COVID, our industry got overlooked because nobody realized how many people were involved in this industry. And we really hadn't done a good job of making noise about the impact that we have and what it takes and the energy and the jobs involved.
Yeah.
So you lobbied a lot during that time. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So March 13th of 2020, I was in San Francisco when everything shut down.
Yeah.
So I had to scramble home. I wasn't even sure I was going to get home. I thought, well, if my flights start getting canceled, I was in California. I thought I'll just grab a car and I'll drive to Phoenix and fly from there, because there was all this worry they were going to shut flights down in California specifically.
Yep.
So anyway, I get home, and within days after that, it became very apparent that this was not going to be a short-term thing, and that our industry was not known about. So there was a guy by the name of Isaac Rothwell who put out a survey, or it was actually, one of those change.org petitions.
Yep.
He put that out pretty much, throwing the flag saying, okay, this is my industry. We're in trouble, and people started signing. And overnight, I can't remember what the number was, but it was several 100,000 signatures he had on this petition. Wow. And so that gave him the aha moment that, hey, I think we need to organize around this. We need to develop something, because we didn't really have anybody that was fighting for the industry as a whole. And to your point, it's because it's very disparate. It's AV companies, it's planners, it's caterers, it's, it's decor people, it's, all these different kind of companies, and they weren't all rolling up together for everybody to see the magnitude of who we were. So we started doing research around that, stood up the Live Events Coalition that spring. I stood up the Minnesota chapter of it, and then I ended up joining the board of directors for the national coalition out of DC, and then got involved in our government affairs team. So we were actually lobbying Congress. We met with over 100 members of Congress. I was fortunate being in Minnesota. 2 of our House reps were on the Small Business Committee. So Dean Phillips and Angie Craig. And so I was able to get their attention here in Minnesota, and they really took the bull by the horns and ran with it. And Dean, his team, and our team wrote the legislation. We actually got a bill through the House to get relief in place, but then it narrowly died in the Senate. So we did not get it through. But what we learned by doing all of that work is that we are 12 million people. It's a $1 trillion industry, and I think that's light. That's what we could.
I do too.
That's what we could substantiate, in our reporting that we could pull together, and over 1 million small businesses. I think it was 1.2 million small businesses that nobody was talking about. Like, we were twice the size of the U.S. auto industry, and nobody was talking about it.
And they were going to be the first to be shut down and the last to be open.
And we couldn't do curbside.
You're right.
And the National Restaurant Association was getting attention because they've been around for over 100 years. They had a lobbyist. They had relationships already built, and they could leverage that and pull the levers. And we had nothing. And so we built that, and we did hire a lobbyist out of DC that really helped us. And they told us that what we got done in 2 years was pretty much doesn't happen. That we were able to get a bill through the House in less than 2 years, starting from scratch. So, yeah. And we're still working on stuff today. People may think that we disappeared. All of us did end up going back to work. And so we had to sort of, lighten our work towards the volunteer efforts. But we actually just put a proposal in last week about modifying the NACE code system. which is
Hmm.
the North American Industry Classification System.
So,
And it's,
okay, I'm not the only one that spends a lot of time trying to figure out what code I
yeah,
actually am. Could it
exactly.
be that one doesn't exist? Is this what you're telling me?
That's exactly what I'm telling you. One doesn't exist, which is
Yes.
what complicated us pulling the research. We didn't have any way to pull the documentation of how big we were because we got codes all over the place, over 30 that we identified.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we put in a proposal to modify the system to create a code. Actually, it's modifying code 70, which currently right now is um, hospitality, leisure, and then we want them to add events to the 70 code. And then underneath that, we would have,
To
subcodes for the sector.
encapsulate
Yep.
all the
But we
sub
would be under
industries.
the hierarchy, the top
Hmm.
sector code of 70 is what we're asking for. And then along with
Amazing.
that, putting in job descriptions because that doesn't exist. So right
Hmm.
now there's, grants come out for helping to educate for education and funding and different things based on job descriptions. And if you're not in that system, you don't ever get the funding for that. So we're working towards kind of getting all those systems in place so that we can start working towards the educational components that are needed. We've got what we're calling the silver resignation coming up.
Hmm.
The average age of people in the live events industry right now is 54 years old
Wow.
and over 30 years of experience typically. And so those people are going to be aging out here in the next 10 years. And so we need to make sure that we've got a feeder system, right? And so we're working on some programming for training, literally all the way down to like the high school level, where we could maybe be identifying students that have an aptitude for tech, for example, and getting them on that pathway to get the training and get into community colleges and things that will train them on the production side so that we have feeder systems into the industry.
How can event pros tap into these resources or follow along as this story is unfolding,
Yeah,
when you're working
so
on
Live
this?
Events Coalition on LinkedIn. Definitely follow us there. I post a lot about this. In fact, I need to put something out about the NACE code situation because we just filed it on Friday.
Mm,
That just happened.
amazing.
Um, and then there's some others. I can put that on my post of other people to watch. It's a number of us that are working together on this whole effort. So
Thank you for all your work
yeah,
on that. It's a big deal, and you don't know until you do. When you're in it, you finally realize, oh, this is a big problem.
yeah,
And
it's a
COVID
big
really
problem.
highlighted something. But thank you for the work of getting that moving, and even down to codes. What
Mhm.
codes are we? And that's been a problem my entire career, quite
Right.
frankly.
And the other thing is those codes are only modified every 5 years. So
Mm,
if we don't get it in now, we got to wait another five
another five
years.
years. Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, so there's an urgency. There's an
Yes,
urgency
there
here. All
is.
right. All right. We want to support this. We're behind it. I know on LinkedIn you've posted things. We were talking about entrepreneurship, and you posted something about what you were calling the burnt toast theory.
Oh
Can
yeah.
you share a little bit about what the burnt toast theory is?
Yeah. So it's about perspective, right? So, you get up in the morning, you make your piece of toast and you ignored your toaster and shoot, you burned it, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can either get upset about that or you can view it as the universe in action and you burn that piece of toast for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe now you got to stick the next piece of toast in, and it takes you 2 minutes longer to get out of the house, right? So maybe you weren't in the intersection when the guy was blowing the stop sign, so you didn't have a car accident, or it delayed you those
Right.
2 minutes, so now you met somebody in the coffee line that you wouldn't have otherwise been standing there, right?
Mm,
It's
yeah.
that whole kind of sliding doors theory, of
Yeah.
that 2 minutes, could change your trajectory, and so
Right.
it's just viewing it as instead of an annoyance and a bad day, that maybe it's setting you up it's protecting you, it's setting you up for something else. So
I love that. I love
perspective.
that. And there's a resilience to that that I think you have to have when you're entrepreneurial like yourself, which leads me to my next question. Obviously, you have this skill set, and you started a company probably 10 years ago,
10 years, yep.
and your experience has been what probably most small business owners experience. There's ups and downs, and how has that ride been? Why did you start it, and what need were you trying to fill, and
Yeah,
how has that journey been?
well, I started it because like most people in corporate, I was downsized, right? So
A familiar
I
story.
don't think I know anybody who has worked in corporate now that hasn't been downsized at some point
Hmm.
in their career. And so that happened to me. And I had been thinking about it. It had been in the back of my mind that someday I wanted to start a business. I actually had started a business prior to that. In 1997, I started a small business making florals, like wreaths and floral arrangements. And I would grow the flowers and dry the flowers and then create stuff. And I put them in gift stores. And I did, I went out to art shows and, put my stuff up, and I did boutiques at my house. And so I did those kind of events. So I always had kind of that entrepreneurial spirit. And it always kind of had been in the back of my mind. I had done an event once, and I posted about this too. It was at the Grammy Museum in LA. And it was a really, really cool event. We were on the top terrace of the Grammy Museum, which is just a blank canvas, right? So we set that all up for decor and brought in wonderful food from Wolfgang Puck, and we were partnering with the Grammy Foundation on it. And so we had students from the Grammy camp that were playing music, and then we had
Cool.
Ken Ehrlich, who was a producer for the Grammys for 30 plus years, come in and speak to our group. And we were about 50 people. And it was just us, very intimate, in the Clive Davis Theater. And he ran a sizzle reel, and then we just got to ask him questions for like 2 hours. We
Wow.
just asked him questions like, what was it like working with, Michael Jackson and, whatever, the combinations, that he would put together. Like, how'd you think about putting Lady Gaga with so-and-so, whatever it was. And we were on the elevator headed down to the theater, and one of the guests from the events turned to me and she said, "Oh, I would never miss a Wendy Porter event. You do the best events. You should start a company, Wendy Porter Events," right? So she says this to me, and this is like 5 years before I got laid off. So that seed is planted in the back of my head, right? And so then I do get laid off. And the first thing I thought of is, okay, it's time. I should start Wendy Porter Events. I have everything I need. I've learned so much in corporate about marketing and events and, management of C-suite and communications and just all the things that I needed to do it myself. And so that was, I knew instantly that's what I was going to do.
I love it. I love it. And the rest is history.
Yeah. And here we are 10 years later.
Here we are.
We survived a pandemic. So
amazing. Congratulations. You made it. You made it to the other side. One of the things that caught my eye when we were initially talking is, the idea of you're a fractional head of events. That's one of the services that you offer.
Right.
And fractional is a rebranding of something that's been happening a lot for years in business, when you have someone on a retainer or contract. But it can be an incredible way of adding to your team without the HR headache that bringing on full-time staff and commitment that full-time staff brings with it.
Right.
And so I think at our company we have a fractional CFO. And, we're a small business. We have financial needs, but there are strategic things that we need, visionary things that quite frankly, we probably couldn't afford to bring someone in full time, but you can rent their time for a little bit a week, and you get that strategic stuff that you need without all the overhead. And that works really great. Well, I thinking of corporations, like there are so many that need someone that knows what the heck they're doing with their events, and why would, this is a very compelling argument, just the title alone. So what made you start thinking about pitching it that way, for lack of a better term?
Well, to your point, fractional is a thing right now, right? It's becoming, I think, bigger and bigger over the last couple of years anyway, from what I've seen. And I thought, well, you've got fractional CMOs, fractional CFOs, fractional COOs. Why not a fractional head of events?
Yeah.
Why not, right? And we're seeing companies that are hiring still not really getting the value of events and why you need to invest in this properly and with the right people,
That
the
disconnect,
right budgets,
the disconnect we're talking.
There's still a disconnect. And they think, well, anybody can do it. Just have the admin do it, or hire the kid right out of college. They can do the event, right? They don't really get what goes into it. And so they're hiring young people because that's what they can afford, right? And that's all fine. Those young people are going to learn, right? But they really need some guidance. And you don't want to be wasting 27% of your marketing budget, which is what we're seeing right now. 27% of the marketing budget is allocated for events now. You don't want to waste that 27%. That's a lot of money.
Right.
So why not bring in a fractional head of events to help guide that team, help teach those young people that you're bringing in, and really making sure that you're being smart with your marketing dollars, right? So that's why I stood it up. I stood it up about a year ago, and still really pushing it. It's not taking off as fast as I hoped it would, but I still think it's the right thing to be doing.
I think it's brilliant, and I wish I could share it every time we deal with a client that is
Yeah.
doing what you're saying, because I have some thoughts. I want to share with you a couple thoughts here. This whole idea in any industry of bringing someone in young and inexpensive, so they fit the bill as far as budget, which was already unreasonable just from the start. And you put them in a situation where they're not learning from anybody. And so,
Right.
yes, you're right. They will eventually learn, but it's such a miserable experience. They might learn themselves right out of the industry and go become a realtor or something.
Right. It's true.
As opposed to what you're proposing, you could also mentor some of the young people into being better at their job too, which I think is a way more long-term investment type of approach, a lot better ROI on that money. So I just feel like sometimes, like in a production company sense, because I see a lot of production companies, you'll hire somebody that's 19 years old and go say, okay, go mic up the whatever city orchestra. Good luck. Here's a bunch of microphones
Yeah.
and some stuff. Don't screw it up.
Right.
And oh yeah, it's you got to work for 20 hours and we're not paying you overtime. See ya.
Right.
And you can do that for a year or two, sure. And then they get burned out and then they
Right.
leave. Well, that's really short-sighted.
Right.
And so I love this idea that you could come in and provide that guidance and potentially could be an asset for their long-term growth of a department. So
For sure. Yep.
what do you think makes a really successful corporate event, like a truly successful corporate event?
Well, so for me, I have a something I like to talk about that I call the cranberry thread. And a cranberry is one of my colors. If you look at my logo, I've got this E woven through the W key
Yeah.
that's cranberry. And so I call it the cranberry thread. And so it's being very intentional about how you're planning. So it's thinking through from the very first touch point that's going to go out to somebody that might be attending your event, to make sure that the feeling and the look, everything that person is experiencing in that first touch point is going to carry all the way through everything that they're experiencing during the event on site, as well as the post-event follow-up, right? So there's a thread, cranberry thread that runs through the whole thing. I think that's what makes a great event, is when you are being very intentional about your planning throughout the whole experience.
I think that's a professionally planned event.
Yeah.
Exactly. You reverse engineer where are we trying to go, and then you reverse engineer back to the beginning, and you can follow that thread through to where you guide them to the end point, and hopefully they retain it. I love it. I love that idea that there's a thread about it. There's something that keeps coming up, and another question I've been wanting to ask you, because I saw a quote. You had a quote in meetings today about venues that use labor unions, and so I'll be on panels or ask questions about this in different environments about the cost of in-house or unions, those types of things, and your advice about that was a little counterintuitive, and I thought it was a fresh take, is how you can work with the reality of certain venue costs as opposed to just avoiding using venues or geographical regions. I thought that was a fresh take, because I think a lot of times people are like, well, how are we going to get out of this? And then what venues are we just going to avoid?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know if that's the road to take. So what were your thoughts when you were?
Well, and sometimes you can't avoid it, right? If you've got a really big event, you're pretty limited on the cities you can go to.
Yeah,
You're
for
gonna
sure.
be going to a union city, so you need to figure out how to work with it, not against it necessarily, right? So it's just being smart about how you partner on that. I always work with production teams that I know and trust and can help me kind of leverage that and make sure that, as we're planning our day, that we're really thinking about the hours that are going in for the team and when am I going to hit that overtime. If we're loading in, making sure that when we're building the contract, we're not trying to load in on a Sunday because I'm going to get hit with overtime, right? So
Right.
just being smart on the front end about how you're setting up your logistics so that you don't inadvertently run into overtime situations that you don't even realize you're going to be doing, right? So that is just making sure you're partnering with the right professionals who understand the rules
Yeah.
and how to engage properly with the union teams. And I find it can be a really good partnership, right? We have to work together. Let's figure out how to
Hmm.
make the most of it and, come up with a great event. And so, yeah.
I love that. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying, you don't have to avoid it. You just do your homework and
Do your
create
homework and make sure you're
relationships.
working with partners that get it, that
Hmm.
know how the unions operate.
Yeah. So we
Because
don't
coming
need
from
to
the
be
corporate
afraid.
side, we don't typically, I'm not a union person. I'm not in a union. I don't interface with unions. I don't really, I don't know the ins and outs of that. And so I need
Yeah.
to work with professionals that do.
Right. That understand that
Yep.
situation. Do you have any other thoughts on controlling costs at events?
Um,
You got us going down this road. So I'm like,
yeah,
I bet you have some interesting takes on.
yeah. I mean, things have gotten pretty kind of out of control, honestly. Yeah, I mean, it's things like instead of having bottled water, can you have pitchers of water with ice on the tables instead?
Hmm.
Right there. That can save you money.
Tons of money.
It's working with all the different teams to get creative on how you're putting things together to try to
Hmm.
save the money.
I'm
Um,
hearing a lot of you need to talk with your partners. You need
you
to
need to
use
talk
the
with your
knowledge
partners
that
and
they have.
engage in people who are experts on it, right? So
Yep.
I've got experts on my team that are food and beverage experts. That's who I'm going
Hmm.
to leverage to figure that stuff out, right?
Yep.
Like I leverage my production partners, help me figure that out. I can't be everything to everybody, right? I can't know everything. So I just make sure I have a really great team around me that does know their subject matters, and that's who I tap for different elements.
And I see that you're very networked. You're a part
Mhm.
of different networks and groups. And I think that's such a skill. Like learning, in this day and age, you still need to connect with people and get their
Mhm.
insights and get their take and realize
Mhm.
that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You actually just have to be good at utilizing the resources around you,
Exactly.
which
Exactly.
is,
So another way to save money would be, I've got thousands of planners now in my network. So if I've got a client and they want to do an event in Seattle or something, well, obviously I'm not in Seattle,
Mhm.
so like, well, we don't want to pay to send you to Seattle. I get that. Well, I've got people, boots on the ground in Seattle that I know and I trust that I would bring in to be part of my team to execute that event for me in
Right.
Seattle. Right. So to your point, being networked is really important because you can tap into people as you need to wherever they are.
And you end up saving people money for
Hmm.
hiring you
Hmm.
because they're renting that network for a time, and that you have resources all over where if they had to reinvent the wheel it could cost twice as much.
Exactly. Exactly. Or just like another example is I had a client, they didn't bring us into the fold until after they had already signed the contract with a
Mm,
convention center. Okay.
hmm.
So they did the site visit themselves. They signed the contract. We had absolutely no
That's
review or
rough.
input on that. So we inherit this contract. So we get into planning and we're working on Wi-Fi. And I come back, I said, well, here's the quote for Wi-Fi. And it was 30 grand, right?
Hmm.
And she's like, well, but they told me they had Wi-Fi. I said, yeah,
They
but
do.
not at the speed you need, you know?
Yeah.
So, because they just didn't know what to ask, right?
Hmm.
And it wasn't her fault. She just didn't know. And they learned a hard lesson that they had to pay $30,000 that wasn't planned in their budget for Wi-Fi because to get the speed that they needed and to get the network they needed. And so, yeah.
Man, if I could make t-shirts, please hire an experienced professional when you're planning an event. That's probably a really dumb t-shirt, but I have seen experienced planners save so much money because they know the questions to ask, because school of hard knocks sometimes,
Yep.
or you take the time to read the contract,
Right.
or you have friends that have done it before. You have
Right.
people that are lending you their experience, and it really does. That's just another example of why I love this fractional head of events. If you hire Wendy, I'm telling you, you will save money. It's, yes, you will be paying her for all of that expertise, but you will save money.
Right. And your
So
team
with
will learn something in the process.
right,
So,
the free education, not
yeah.
free, but an
Yeah.
education that they
Yeah.
can then deploy. And I
Exactly.
love it. It's just a good, you're talking about that. What did you call it? The silver retirement?
Silver resignation.
Silver resignation.
Yeah, or retirement.
I almost had it.
It's both, right? It's retirement and resignation. People who are going to be leaving
this
the
is
industry.
helping to mitigate that institutional knowledge that will be lost over the next decade by having people that know what they're doing around. So, okay, your company, what are you excited about right now? Like, what are the things that get you excited and like, I love this and this is what I want to be doing?
Yeah, well, I love that we're seeing events evolving into more, we're calling it kind of moment planning, right? Those little elements of surprise that you plan into events, and also people finally recognizing that you need some white space in your day. The breaks are necessary from a brain standpoint. I posted about this a couple weeks ago about the brain science of taking the proper breaks and letting your brain sort of catch up to what you just heard. You know, there are reasons why TED Talks are only 10 to 18 minutes long. It's because that's how long you can focus, and then you need to take a break, right?
Yes.
So people are getting smarter about how we're planning agendas and doing more of this moment planning, which I think is really cool because it's really creating the experiences that are going to create the memories and help people retain the information. I think AI is pretty amazing. I have, gotten on board with that in the last year, and I'm telling you, I use it every day, several times a day. And it's, I think it's a game changer as far as helping us just speed up our processes and for writing and things like that. So I think that's pretty exciting. I think, we're going to see more personalization coming in with technology happening. There's some pretty cool technology out there now where, the geofencing things that we can do to get messaging to people when they're at an event. So it's custom to them. I think some of that is really exciting. So like I said, I think it's this moment planning in a very personalized way so that people really are going to get what they really want out of events moving forward.
Moment planning. I love that. And it falls in line with your, cranberry thread.
Yeah, it does.
Through. You can place these moments that are all strategic, all part of
and
that.
Making it relevant for each person. You got to figure out, with data, we can figure out what resonates with me versus what resonates with you. What are the sessions? We're going to be able to get to a point where we can even help people. Like if you're at a conference and let's say there's 5 tracks of content, educational content, we're going to be able to get to a place where it's going to be able to recommend and say, Wendy, based on your interests, you should go to these 5 sessions. Right. And then we're going to be able to track that better to see, how did it go when she was in that session? What did she engage with? And just
better engagement, a better custom experience for each attendee. Yep. I love it. And speaking of resonating, if what someone's listening to resonates with them, how would someone learn more about Wendy Porter Events?
Sure. So several ways you can find me. So I'm on all the social channels. LinkedIn is the best one. I'm on there multiple times a day and respond to messages fairly quickly there. You can email me, which is just wendy@wendyporterevents.com. Or go to our webpage, wendyporterevents.com. At the very bottom, if you slide down on the homepage, there's a form you can fill out to find open times in my calendar for a free 30-minute conversation.
Love it. I love it. Well, Wendy, this has been a blast. It was everything I hoped it would be and a little more. I learned something. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
And thank you for joining us on the Event Pro Show. Be sure to join us every other Thursday where we'll be releasing episodes from Event Pros in every corner of events. The idea is to just give you content that help you grow as an event professional. Have a great day. The Event Pro Show is a production of LEMG, video by Nick Barrett, audio and post-production by Prince Thompson. You can learn more about us at lemg.live.